Today I have a very special video that I've been wanting to make for a very long time. What you are about to see is never before seen footage of the beta for Super Mario 64. Late last year, around December, a friend of mine whose father was a programmer for Nintendo in 1995 gave me a really strange Nintendo 64 cartridge as a Christmas present. It had tape on it with the words Super Mario 64 Beta 2A on it. I guess he wanted me to have it so I could show the world via my YouTube channel. Before you ask, it is my intention to dump this ROM just as soon as I get a hold of the necessary equipment. That way, people who are more knowledgeable than me can dissect the code and find out what's really going on under the hood. Now, when I received the cartridge, I assumed it was some kind of prank, like I would turn on the console and it would be Superman 64 or something like that. But when I booted it up, I was shocked. That was definitely Super Mario 64, but not how I remember it. People who are familiar with the subject know that a number of things were changed from the beta version of the game, but they probably didn't think it was nearly as substantial as this. There's a really strange madhouse quality to this version of the game, far more so than the final release. The worlds are so large and shrouded in fog, creating a strangely oppressive atmosphere. I guess they were still trying to figure out what the ideal size and scope of a sprawling 3D world should be. But there was also this really creepy room with all these Marios just like standing there. It was so bizarre, but I guess they could just be placeholders for something else. Playing through this version of the game felt like a strange descent into insanity. This is a wildly different game than the final product, and it feels so surreal to have an official beta cartridge. I mean, just look at this. Can you believe they were actually thinking of releasing this? And what are the odds that I, of all people, would end up getting this? It all feels kind of surreal. Well, I'm really sorry about this, but I just lied to you for a straight minute. April Fools! This is actually the ROM hack B3313. Some of my regular viewers may have recognized it pretty quickly. Using the power of basic visual effects, I made it look somewhat closer to what it might have looked like if it was real hardware, recorded off an actual N64 with a VCR. And if I was talking to people who weren't in my circle of knowledge, I might have been able to trick some of them into thinking it was real. And if I traveled back in time 15 years and put this footage on a series of anonymous 4chan posts, I might have spawned an entire community. And as for the cartridge, well, I made that in Blender. That's right, I'm an artist. Oh, and the ROM hack? It's really good. I highly recommend it. Enter the world of video game myths, urban legends, and hoaxes, a world full of Mews living under trucks, ice keys unlocking the gates of hell, and of course Saddam Hussein's epic gamer pad. Hoaxes have always been popular in the gaming world. Today, they often take the form of fake gaming leaks. Metal Gear fans might remember last November, somebody released a video of a jungle setting with pretty graphics before cutting to black and spelling out the date of the Game Awards in Morse code. The implication was pretty obvious. At the Game Awards, they're gonna announce a remake of Snake Eater and it's gonna have the best graphics ever made. And you'll never guess what never happened. A lot of Metal Gear fans love falling for very obvious hoaxes and pranks, not only because we've been stuck in the bargaining phase of grief since 2015, but also because back when Kojima was still working on it, he used to pull weirdo shit all the time. There are people out there who convince themselves of insane nonsense like this all the time, like how everything that went down with Konami was an elaborate ruse for Metal Gear Solid 6 Revengeance of the Solids, which was hinted at in the director's cut of Death Stranding by this box of oranges. Trust me. I think the reason these types of hoaxes are so popular is because they're insisting upon something that they know people really want to believe is true. Kinda like when people say the next Nintendo Direct is gonna announce a Thousand Year Door remake, a Star Fox movie, BanjoKazooie, Donkey Kong Country Revenge, and an official localization of Mother 3, and it's all coming out in May. Yeah, sure thing, Buster. Next I suppose they're gonna remaster Metroid Prime. One of my earliest memories of these types of hoaxes was a game called Zelda 3, the Triforce Saga. Everybody I know loves Zelda, so obviously a mystery Zelda game is gonna get some attention. I saw it in a Yuri of Wind video where he did a little cursory digging and concluded that it was a bunch of bullshit.
Oh my god, it's real! It's not real. Oh, it's real! No. Yes! pics or it didn't happen. Fuck you, you're stupid.
Basically, this eBay man insisted that he was in possession of a prototype of Zelda 3 for the NES. Some of you Zelda fans in the audience may know that no such video game exists, at least not officially, not with that title, and certainly not for the NES. So the premise was that this was a never-before-seen prototype of a game that the world was completely unaware of. It is worth noting that a third Zelda game was planned for the NES, but was abandoned shortly after the Super Nintendo got the green light. Right off the bat, there was a lot of shady stuff about the deal, most notably the seller's repeated insistence that he was just way too busy to even test it out. Typically, you know, when you're knowingly in possession of an obscenely elusive cartridge with that much cultural and historical significance, you don't just go, yeah, super rare Zelda 3, I don't know, maybe I'll play it, maybe I won't, I don't know. Just as a side note, I should let you guys know that I actually own the only copy of Mother 64 released to the public, but man, my job, the kids, the taxes, the leaky faucet, the stupid water heater, the dentist appointments, I just can't find the time. But I promise you, when all of those things go away, I'll upload a really blurry screenshot to prove that I'm telling the truth. For the record, that's actually what the Zelda 3 guy did. He posted this blurry screenshot of the title screen. Then he promised more photos and footage and did not deliver on that, so that pretty much settled the matter right there. I also recall an entirely different situation the following year where somebody posted a blurry picture of Microsoft's supposed E3 lineup for 2013. Said lineup supposedly contained a new BanjoKazooie game called BanjoKazooie Gruntyland. And while it wasn't true at all, this is an early exemplary use of what would become a very popular method of creating a fake leak. Just quickly make a collage of PNGs in a basic image editing software and then take a blurry, barely in focus photo of it with your phone to make it look like you're some kind of undercover insider, sneakily taking a photo while nobody's looking. And at least one of those things should be something that people really want to see, like the fabled Donkey Kong versus the Gay Beaver. Some of the most popular video game creepypastas were based on hoaxes that tried to convince you that they were real to add to the scare factor. Herobrine was one of the earliest and most popular examples of this, alleging that a ghostly version of Steve would show up in Minecraft and he'd have dead hollow eyes and he'd chase you or something, and also he is the spirit of Notch's brother who died by slipping on a plate of jello and falling down a flight of stairs. Because of the nature and context of Minecraft's development at the time, it was able to be quickly deconfirmed, but some of these were a little bit more convincing. Take Majora's Mask for instance, a game that was released in 2000 by a bunch of Japanese people who are in their 50s and don't have Twitter accounts and therefore cannot field any questions about creepy Link statues. Yeah, we're talking about Ben Drowned, considered one of the better creepypastas of the day. Oh come on, don't laugh at that, it was actually good. The creepypasta fad was in full swing when Ben Drowned was conceived, but what set it apart was that there was actual video footage of the events unfolding, instead of just a giant wall of text describing what was happening. The go-to principle when it comes to determining the truth about things like this can be summarized in 5 simple words. Pics, or it didn't happen. And this time there were pics, roughly 20 of them per second, so clearly it did happen, right? Well, no. Actually not. The footage that sold this spooky tale was a heavily modified version of Majora's Mask. When it first started, I remember a surprising number of people honestly thought, or at least asked, if the game really was haunted. I remember watching the videos and finding it really unsettling, but I noticed at some point that the footage completely swapped to Ocarina of Time, and I pretty much realized at that point that it was fake. Eventually, the author admitted as much, revealing that the events were manufactured and that there was not in fact a haunted cartridge, but continued making videos anyway, just to keep the story going. But that initial question of, wait a minute, is this for real? That made it special, and there was a lot of effort put into legitimizing it, which seemed to pay off because again, I remember people actually asking if it was real. Maybe they were just pretending to think it was real for fun, but it's also possible that ROM hacks and mods weren't as much of a colloquial and accessible concept back when the hoax was made. They definitely existed, but not like today where they're decompiling entire games to make native PC ports. Like I said in the beginning, it's easier to trick people who aren't in the know, and realistically, I imagine not as many people were at the time. Which brings us to Lavender Town Syndrome, a hoax claiming that the very early versions of Pokemon Red and Green contained frequencies within the Lavender Town theme that caused children to suffer crippling psychological effects, and in the worst of cases, suicidal behavior. The potential psychological ramifications of musical frequencies on developing brains is another topic that isn't considered common knowledge, which may have added to the mystery. You know, if you didn't know anything about this topic, it might be easier to sell you on the idea that something like this could be real. Also, the fact that it allegedly happened in a very isolated area in Japan probably made it more mysterious than if it was worldwide. I guess the one tiny piece of truth to this is that as you get older, the frequency range of your ears begins to deteriorate, so children are generally able to hear frequencies that adults cannot, that is, if they actually exist. Of course, Lavender Town Syndrome is fake. Nobody got sick, nobody saw a spooky corpse, nobody saw a white hand, all they did was murder Gary's Raticate. You know, maybe. Although music has a proven ability to affect your mood, it's highly unlikely, at least to my way of thinking, that an otherwise healthy and well-adjusted person can be irreversibly corrupted in a manner so severe by something as simple as music or even a video game. Unless it's part of some kind of Clockwork Orange rehab program. Well, maybe Saints Row 5 might do some damage. I think what made this hoax so popular was the fact that the original Lavender Town theme really is unsettling. The Game Boy only has 4 sound channels, and somehow they managed to produce something downright chilling. Listening to this song really does feel like death is looking over your shoulder and reading your emails behind your back and writing down the numbers of your credit card. And even if it was real, the news media would have been going absolutely ballistic over it, because even today, they never pass up an opportunity to tell people that video games are destroying civilization. Speaking of media outrage over video games, Grand Theft Auto has always been a hotbed for hoaxes. Since the game's worlds are so incredibly lifelike, it's only natural that people would start to spread rumors and hoaxes about the many mysteries of the fictional world. So it makes sense that one of the most popular rumors about this lifelike fictional world would be the existence of Bigfoot in San Andreas, inspired of course by the supposed existence of Bigfoot in real life. Much like in the real world though, there is no definitive proof that Bigfoot is in the game, but again, much like the real world, people have made efforts to legitimize those rumors. In the case of GTA, this includes things like mods that actually put him in the game. What's really cool about this stuff is that Rockstar actually started adding weirdo urban legend stuff into their games themselves, like a chained up beating heart inside the Statue of Liberty, and UFOs being present in GTA 5. The best hoaxes have little elements of truth hidden somewhere in there to make it more believable, like the Zelda 3 prototype. One of my favorites though concerns literal actual Saddam Hussein, who allegedly ordered several thousand PS2s to create a super powerful computing cluster for military operations. That was not true, of course, but I'm reminded of that AVGN episode on Dark Castle where he sees the word Saddam was here and Gamers Rule written on the wall with the same handwriting. Thinking of that, I imagine it's possible that he owned at least one PS2, unless he was more of a GameCube guy. I don't know, I never met him. I recall some speculations that this rumor was actually some kind of guerrilla marketing tactic by Sony to make the PS2 seem like this all-destroying piece of hardware, when in reality it was the only console that ran Sonic Heroes at 30 FPS. As far as we know, Saddam's epic PS2 cluster never existed, but things like it do exist. Computing clusters were later made out of PS3 consoles such as the Condor cluster created by the Air Force Research Laboratory in 2010. Consisting of 1,760 consoles and 168 GPUs, this cluster was designed to analyze super high-resolution satellite imagery and weighed in at around 500 teraflops. To put that into perspective, the PS5 clocks in at around 10 teraflops, so that's about 50 PS5s, which should tell you a lot about how powerful game consoles have gotten and how quickly it's happened. All of this is to say that Saddam's epic gamer cluster could have probably existed in theory, but it did not exist in reality. And of course, neither do Pokemon. But even though the aforementioned Lavender Town syndrome doesn't exist, some Pokemon hoaxes do have some truth to them, the most famous one being that Missingno was some kind of elusive legendary Pokemon, or was Mew 3, or that bird at the end of the first episode of the anime, but that's just Ho-Oh, you dumbass. In case you've never heard of Missingno, the SparkNotes version is that by performing a very specific series of actions in a very specific order, the game spawns a Pokemon called Missingno who takes an indescribable pixelated blocky form. When Pokemon Red and Blue first came out, nobody knew what this thing was. There were tons of theories ranging from a fourth legendary bird, a different version of Mew, or a completely different legendary altogether. In the face of all these wild speculative theories and hoaxes, the truth turned out to be very underwhelming. Missingno is an abbreviation of missing number, and the appearance is the result of a programming error that occurs after doing the things I alluded to previously. The glitch did, however, inspire people to dig more into the game's code, with some speculating that it's the result of the game accessing empty slots that used to contain Pokemon that were later removed. There are a lot of theories, and the existence of the Pokemon makes it more tangible. Nintendo even officially acknowledged Missingno in things like Nintendo Power, going as far as to advise against performing the glitch as it may screw up your save file. It's also worth noting that there was a similar thing with the old Mortal Kombat games where the word Ermac shows up under certain circumstances. A lot of people assumed that it was a secret character that you can unlock, when in reality it was just an abbreviated error code. Error macro, Ermac. But a few decades went by and they said f it, and they actually made a character called Ermac, and they made him a top tier as well. How's that for a celebration? Since I brought up Mew, it's also worth noting that there was a very widespread hoax that if you somehow managed to get onto this island with a truck, you would find Mew hiding under the truck, and even though it wasn't true, the devs also acknowledged this hoax in later versions of the game by putting a rare item there for fun. That was very nice of them. Now, when talking about semi-plausible hoaxes and myths, we gotta acknowledge the king of semi-plausible hoaxes and myths, and that is Luigi in Super Mario 64. Luigi was present in pretty much every other mainline Mario game until then, so it was weird that he wasn't even acknowledged. Some folks were convinced by that fact alone that he just had to be in the game somewhere, and they simply hadn't figured out where he was or how to find him. But there was one element in the game that seemed like the center of the universe, the most important piece of the puzzle, the missing link, that would fuel many of the conspiracies that Luigi is in fact in the game. And that was a really blurry ass texture in the courtyard that people are dead certain says the words L is real 2401. Now when I saw it, I thought it said bilinear filtering and limited texture cache, but hey, that's just me. People made the conclusion that obviously L must stand for Luigi and that he would be real after some event corresponding to the number 2401. Theories on the significance of this number ranged from the supposed release dates for Paper Mario, or that you'd unlock them after collecting all 2,401 coins in the game, which is wrong because I looked it up and there are actually like 2,090, but I guess they figured that that's basically the same. Off by like 300, whatever, I don't even like Luigi. The idea of people hunting down every single coin in Mario 64 thinking it would unlock Luigi is insane, and I can't help but feel bad for the people who actually tried it thinking it would do something. Of course, little did they know at the time, there actually was some truth hidden somewhere in there. As per one of the Giga leaks from a couple of years ago, Luigi was revealed to have come very close to being in the game. Luigi tracks were uncovered in the game's leaked source code, and interviews with Miyamoto and others revealed that he was supposed to be in the game as part of an ill-fated two-player mode. And while the actual game doesn't have any such features, of course numerous ROM hacking projects would bring that functionality back to life.
Alright, let me show you a shortcut.
What? But as for the actual released game, Luigi is not in there in any measurable way. Then of course we have my other favorite hoax generator, Stop and Swap in BanjoKazooie. This was a feature that would allow the player to swap cartridges between BanjoKazooie and BanjoTooie while playing the game to unlock some secret goodies. Kinda like a customer loyalty bonus or something. The feature was alluded to at the end of BanjoKazooie, but Nintendo wasn't too hot on the idea of players taking cartridges in and out of active systems, so it was never completed, at least as far as we know. Remnants of the feature can, however, be found in BanjoTooie, such as the ice key and the eggs. As far as what it might have unlocked, the theory that I find most agreeable is that everything it would have unlocked in BanjoTooie ended up in the game through other avenues. I guess including the scrapped bottles mode, there are like 7-ish secret things corresponding to the 7 stop and swap items. Things like the Dragon Kazooie, the Kazooie Slam, homing eggs, Jinjo in multiplayer, extra air, and the ability to swim faster could have all been features of the original stop and swap. And also, the Trough and Scoff area in Donkey Kong 64 has the same music as the stop and swap item fanfare in BanjoKazooie, which leads me to believe that Trough and Scoff may have at one point been stop and swap, and somehow this room here would serve some purpose conducive to the feature, but of course, that opens up the rabbit hole of DK64 being roped into stop and swap as well, and at that point, it's just one thing after another. And finally, we have the king of all video game hoaxes, Polybius, an arcade cabinet that supposedly popped up in the area of Portland, Oregon, and was visited by government agents on a regular basis. This game's very existence has never once been proven and is probably one of the oldest urban legends in the gaming world, with some accounts traced back as far as 1994. The most concrete thing was a listing on a site called coinop.org which listed arcade cabinets, specifying a 1981 release date and a copyright holder, Sinnesloschen, which translates roughly to sensory deprivation or sensory deletion or simply sense delete. There was also a man claiming to be a programmer for the game, explaining that the cabinet was removed from circulation after a boy had a seizure playing it out of fear of legal repercussions. Personally, when I think back to my middle school days, I imagine that if word got out that an arcade game was giving kids seizures, it would make all the other kids want to play it and would make $3 billion. I don't know what it was like back in those days, but when I was around that age, kids had all this dumbass rite of passage shit where you knowingly did things that were dangerous and harmful to prove that you weren't a bitch ass, so thinking of that, an arcade game that gave people seizures would get a lot of money from that crowd. But I'm not a businessman, so maybe I'm just way off. To this day, it is considered to be a hoax, but maybe that's just what they want you to think. Just like they want you to think there's no nude code for Tomb Raider. Why do people make hoaxes anyway? Perhaps it's just the thrill of trying to trick lots of people, but of course sometimes there are ulterior motives like trying to sell a $3,000 fake-ass prototype or to get clout. But whatever the reason, hoaxes add an element of mystery to games that is slowly disappearing. For better or worse, though probably better if we're talking big picture, it is way harder to sell these kinds of hoaxes nowadays because most of us have gotten wise to how these things work. We know the tricks, we know the plays, and a lot of us know how much easier it is to make something look authentic when it's not. I could probably make fake Ocarina of Time screenshots in Blender if I really wanted to. Just drop Link in the middle of some low poly rocks, render it out at 320 by 240, add a slight film grain overlay to it, and upload it anonymously. But most people would probably know that's what happened. At the end of the day, maybe we just got too smart for video game hoaxes and legends. Until, AI generated images take over, but that's enough from me. If I don't see you again by Easter, then happy Easter, happy fool-ass April Fool's Day, and tell me, what are some of your favorite gaming myths, legends, and hoaxes? Spin me a tale in the comments below.